Welcome into another Dolphins podcast. Joining me today to break down Anthony Weaver's defense, Mike McDaniel, and Tua Tagovailoa's chemistry, along with other storylines to follow throughout training camp. He's the co-host of Fins TV on YouTube. Steve Hallett, thank you so much for taking the time to talk a little Miami Dolphins football. How's it going today?
I am absolutely thrilled to be here, Jake. I'm doing great. I know Josh is not able to be with you today. Very big shoes to fill. But I am excited to be here. It's actually an honor. I know Another Dolphins Podcast has done some fantastic work over the past couple seasons. And really, it is. I'm looking forward to being here with you, talking some Dolphins, getting near the end of the off season, very, very close to training camp. And I'm starting to get that the feeling, the skin starts to crawl a little bit. Stomach's a little bit uneasy when you think about it. It's excitement is what it is.
Steve, I always love chatting with you and Sammy over on Fins TV, but we've known each other much longer than that. I went and did a little bit of research before this show. Steve at Steve Hallett on X on Twitter. You joined the app in 2009. So there's a lot of Dolphins content has gone through that Twitter feed. It does feel like we've reached the point you hit refresh and it feels like there might be a little present boxed in there, but Twitter since 2009. When can we say you've been a Dolphin fan since?
I've been a Dolphins fan since I was 7. It's a very long story. I'll try to keep it short. I'm actually from Western New York, about 45 minutes away from Buffalo.
Ooh.
And didn't have any allegiance to any team or anything like that. My mom was on a trip and she was at the airport or some sporting goods store and said, "Hey, what hat do you want? They've got a Broncos and they've got a Dolphins." And I could have flipped a coin at that time right now. And I like Dolphins. I was 7. So I said Dolphins and it stuck with me ever since. Stuck with me through some very, very tough times in the early 90s in high school, aging myself. But when the Bills went back to back Super Bowls, only thing I'll say that I've told many people every time I tell this story is those Mondays after the Super Bowl were my best days of high school, strutting down the halls. I probably had my Zubaz pants on, a big smile on my face. So long road to get down to living in Florida, still about 4 hours away from Miami now, but definitely around a lot more Dolphins fans than when I lived up in Western New York.
Now living down in Florida, how about the last, let's say 5 years? What's been the one moment as a Dolphins fan that really sticks out?
I'd say that there's quite a few, and I don't want to give too many spoilers away here to what we're going to be talking about, but I think it was about 5 years ago, actually, that the Dolphins came up to Tampa to do some joint practices, played hooky from work. I didn't. I actually took some time off like a good guy and went to both of the open practices. Absolutely exciting experience being up that close to them. I mean, I've got a lot of them. Actually, let me back up. If I'm being honest, my number one experience in Florida as a Dolphins fan has to be my wife and I met a little over 12 years ago, and we hit it off immediately as Dolphins fans. And then a few years later, went down to the Chargers game in Miami and had some passes. Shout out to Antoine Staley, one of my absolutely most favorite people on this entire app. And when he was down working the Dolphins beat, he hooked me up with somebody and we got sideline passes, and I proposed to her on the sidelines pre-game.
Oh, stop. That's awesome.
Yeah. And then to top it off, we wiped the Chargers off the field 37-0 in that game. So that was an absolutely outstanding game. So,
Steve, was this the game? It was right. Did Joe Philbin's dad pass away the week before? Was it that year?
Well, no, I don't think it was. I'm trying to think. That had to have been 2014, I think. And trying to
Steve, I think we were at the same game.
Really?
I was on the sideline at that game. I'm losing my mind over here. How did I not remember this?
37-0. Actually, you know what? It might have been the media weekend or something.
Yep, it was Web Weekend. Yeah,
it was Web Weekend back when I think they don't do that anymore, but it was back when they did that.
Oh my God, my dad.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
it was an absolutely incredible experience, that game. Again, getting the pregame passes to the sidelines, being that close to all the players, and knowing, what I was about to do. So no, everything that day went off without a hitch. It was perfect. That's my absolute number one best experience as a Dolphins fan in the past 8 years or so, 9 years.
I cannot believe we have the same best experience. Like, that was, my dad had never been to a game down in Florida. Working for Cover 32 as the editor, I got to go down there, got to take my dad down. His first game, that's amazing. Matthew Canada was down there. It's amazing. I cannot believe I don't remember that. I just have to assume I was so starstruck just kind of looking around that stadium. But Steve, you hinted at it. We've reached training camp and you kind of scratched at it. Can you tell me a little bit about what it was like to see the Bucs and Dolphins going at it in person? Was it easy to tell, like, top talent just kind of stood above everyone else?
It was great. And again, I'm old, but I am still the little kid when I get around the Dolphins. I'm not going to even apologize for it. Some people around the social media streets try to act tough and put people down for wearing jerseys and stuff. I'm that guy. I'm the one that's peeking over to just get as close as I can to people. It was fantastic. And I think what makes when they're doing the training camp experiences, and I haven't been to the ones in Miami, but what made it really great here versus, say, going to a scrimmage and especially to a game is you are right there. You have the same exact access as the big paper beat writers. Everybody's walking around. So if Jeff Darlington is doing a feature for ESPN to cover those practices, he's standing right there. You see, the Joe Shads, the Omar Kellys, Armando walking around. That you're getting the same exact access as they are. And probably, it's storms. It's Tampa, it's Florida, summertime storms like clockwork every single afternoon. And sure enough, lightning and thunder pushed everybody inside, and they just funneled us all inside the big dome bubble. Awesome. And I'm literally sitting right on the first row of these little bleachers inside. It's a truncated field, but right there, everybody's there. The players, it was Gesicki. He was a little bit newer. Kenny Stills was, coming off of a really strong season with us. You got Dan Marino walking around. Everybody's there. Chris Greer. Such a up close, intimate experience with that. So I can't say that any specific player stood out to me, but the one thing that really stood out to me was post practice in the bubble. I can't even call it a bubble because it's an actual structure. It's a building, but the bubble shaped structure. Almost every single Dolphin stuck around to sign autographs for all the kids and hang out with all, and meet everybody. And you feel bad, but one Buccaneer player stuck around. So, it just showed the character, the different mindset of the Dolphins players, that they knew that people who didn't get that experience to be there really did it. So that was great. The really fanboy in me experience of that those couple days of training camp is, I admit that I know where they stay when they come to Tampa. So me, my wife, and my sister-in-law, all huge Dolphins fans, we go and we stalk out the bar area of this hotel. And it's pathetic of us, but we're just sitting there watching these people walk by and the players and everything. And we're like, oh my God, that's that person, that person. And then we're sitting in the bar high top, and in walks Dan Marino in his sweats and a t-shirt and just, walks right next to me, sits at the bar. I did get the warning from the bartender that if I dared to approach him, I would likely get kicked out. So I held myself back, but it was 2019 because that was the season leading up to us drafting Tua. And we brought in Ryan Fitzpatrick, and he came strolling through the lobby. And my sister-in-law and I, we scurry up to him to say hi to him. And we had like a 10, 12, 15-minute conversation with him there. Absolute nicest guy. He knew what he was in Tampa to be. He was there to be the stopgap between us and drafting whoever it was going to be that we ended up drafting. And he ended up sticking around a couple seasons with us. But it was incredible few days experience that we had there during the training camp.
Speaking of training camp, we have arrived. We have reached that time of year. And Steve, being such a Miami Dolphins fan, June, we don't hear much. But being on Twitter, in July is so much fun because it does seem like you can get not only beat reporter stories, but those people who are just hanging out at the practices. They'll kind of give you a different perspective. What type of information were you looking for pre-Twitter, would you say? What would you be kind of searching for to hear during training camp? Would it be in the newspaper? And basically what I'm trying to get at here is when we're crafting what you are looking for this summer, where did that really stem from?
It's really getting information that, well, it's two things. One, confirmation of what some people are saying, because sometimes one person saying something doesn't mean that it's true, that it really happened. Right. So in pre-social media, you really had to work. I don't want to say you worked hard, but you had to, it wasn't at our fingertips on our phones 24/7. It wasn't, just open up the internet and find any of the different sites that are out there. So it was just getting the confirmation, but it was also hearing who has a chance to break through, because everybody knows the names. We know who's going to be on there on the roster. It's finding those diamonds in the rough, the Cater Kohus, the Nick Needhams, those players that have that, who the heck is this guy? Where did he come from? And why did he go undrafted? Or how did this person last until the 5th round of the draft? And then, it turns into Rashad Jones and you're like, oh yeah. Are you kidding me? No, absolutely not. So it's, I can go back further to the days of just waiting for that, the paper to come on a weekend, and you'd get the little tiny blurb and you'd hope that they might mention around the NFL, the Dolphins or something like that before I lived here. But it's just, and in today's environment, I think touching on what you were saying before, it's more of, I really enjoy the open access that people bring to it, because if the media, one person's eyes can't see it all. And I know, Travis Wingfield, he's always posting out things like that. But when you see different people's perspectives, because he might be sitting at a certain spot and you've got 10 fans sitting in a different spot, and every single one of them are oohing and on about something and how great it was. It's getting those different views, those different angles. Somebody posts up a video. So those are the things that I really look for when it comes to training camp, especially now. And in an environment where every single month the NFL has us on at certain times, a very slow drip of keeping us engaged every single month out of the year, you've got to find something to stand out. And that's the people who are able to be there and bring it to us and give us some different flavors.
So let's hear it, Steve. What are your top 3 storylines? We'll go one by one here. What are you looking for in training camp?
All right. First and foremost, I have to say that the Vic Fangio experience really left me hungry. And I used those words because you'd heard that Vic was off for a season away from the NFL, cooking up stuff in his kitchen and everything. And then he came out, and I think I said this on Finn's TV. I had the feeling that it was like getting a TV dinner, handed in front of you. It left us all wanting and wondering what the heck was going on. So I have to say, number one, it's Anthony Weaver coming into this defense, and what is he going to bring to us? The past 2 seasons were, what are we at? 24th and 22nd respectively in terms of points against.
Yep.
That's not cutting it. And frankly, if you want to find a season when we were ranked better than that, it was the second, let me see, Flores, I think, had us there. Go back to Philbin before that. So we've had a very, very consistent streak of having an underwhelming defense. So I'd say number one, it's that. And what is he going to bring to it? Is he going to be able to crack the Cam Smith shell? You have to wonder, was he a bust, or did he just not grasp the system? Did he get on Vic Fangio's bad side? So just a lot of questions with that. How is he going to be able to patch the holes with Phillips and Chubb as they recover and get themselves back on the field and get themselves ready? Saw a picture today of the Greek god Jalen Phillips, back in the gym and working out. I'm like, did he ever not go in the gym or something? So
I was thinking the same
thing. Clearly he's working his way back, but you got to wonder, how is he going to patch those holes with the players that we've picked up, which I have to say, I'm really excited about some of the players that we've brought in to fill those gaps. And then, is Weaver going to encourage and allow Jalen Ramsey, who frankly is probably our best defensive player, to roam around and follow that number 1 wide receiver on the opponents? Is he going to experiment, kind of like we've been hearing a little bit of, hey, is he moving back into safety a little bit? What types of looks is he going to give? Because, and I'd written up some notes that I probably won't get to, but our defensive backfield is deep. And I probably shouldn't say this because we're only a couple years removed from having people off the street play for us at the end of the year in our defensive backfield. But it's an extremely deep, but also versatile defensive backfield unit. I think we have 17 of them on the roster right now. 10 of them are household names, if not 11 of them. And I just think that it's an opportunity to see how is Weaver going to make up for losing a Wilkins, Jerome Baker. I mean, I think losing Baker's tough because it's a name. It's somebody that, it's that pillow that we got used to holding it every night. And now it's not there anymore. But hey, I've got two of them here. So we've got, the two, I had them here on the top of my head, Walker and Brooks, to come in. Really excited to see. And hopefully what they bring to the game is going to help us in those deficient areas, like stopping Josh Allen from the scrambling quarterbacks and maybe just bring a different layer to it. So that's my number one thing. Offense was ranked 11th and 2nd respectively over the past 2 seasons. Having a defense that ranks very, very poorly is just washing a lot of that. It takes a second-ranked point scoring offense and really just, neutralizes that some. So we really want to avoid that from being the case.
I love the idea of a Vic Fangio frozen dinner because the stars don't align often for what happened with that Miami Dolphins defense. Like the amount of sheer talent on that roster is just so impossible to reach year after year when you have Christian Wilkins, Zach Steeler, Bradley Chubb, Jalen Phillips up front, Andrew Van Ginkel in the mix. And I won't just go there and list the entire roster, but I love that. I just feel like it was so many empty calories of just what could have been with Vic Fangio. I want to ask you about the cornerbacks real quick. I don't know if this is just something I got kind of stuck on, but I do like the idea that Jalen Ramsey can kind of play all over the field. The same is true what they're trying to do with Nick Needham as a safety and a slot cornerback, Kader Kohu kind of known as a slot cornerback. I love the addition of Kendall Fuller. I think he's a solid player. He's someone you can trust on the outside. But how do you feel about that boundary depth? Who would be that guy? Because years of Byron Jones getting injured, Xavier Howard getting injured, Jalen Ramsey's knee injury last year. I do not want to deal with any more injuries, but that's just where my head goes. If you have Fuller and Ramsey as your 1A and 1B on the outside, who would you put as the third option?
So very, very small sample set, but Ethan Bonner stepped up when he needed to. So I'm excited to see what he can do with another year of experience in the league, and especially with Anthony Weaver, more exposure to Jalen Ramsey and getting that, by osmosis and just observation and being around him. And again, I'll go back to Cam Smith. What he did he was kind of, I don't want to say feast or famine, but when he was dead on, he was extremely on, and he was a stud at South Carolina. We just didn't get a chance to see what is he going to be able to bring, but he is an outside corner. So I really hope that he's not that bust category, that let's just say he had a bad rapport with Vic and he maybe just couldn't pick it up that quickly. But second year in the league, he's going to have an opportunity to prove himself and get some play time. That was one of my top things. That was like my number 5 item that I'd worked up for what we were going to be able to talk about tonight. So I'm glad I get a chance to talk about it. So I think that they're going to be showing a lot more of like I think they talked about how Weaver likes the 3 safety looks. So that'll take some of the pressure off the cornerbacks from having to worry about so much behind them. But with Poyer and Holland and the different looks that I think that we're capable of having back there, bringing in a third safety could put a lot more pressure on the quarterbacks, could provide some of that safety insurance against the scrambling quarterbacks. And really, what we need to do is, so many times we've seen, and not so much in the past couple of years, but it was more, when Boyer was a defensive coordinator. I know Sammy from Finn's TV and the podcast loved to call it 3rd and Boyer. It could be 3rd and 17, and they would pick up 18 yards. But you've got to find a way to get off the field and get our offense back on the field where we can do what really is, what we're out there to do, and that's score points. And you got to keep them off. So I think Poyer is a really big pickup for the experience, but knowing that Nick Needham is doing that cross training again, going back to Ramsey, there's been some talk that, hey, maybe he's going to do a little bit of shifting towards safety later on in his career. What is this, his 9th season? So I think that, we're going to see some change, but you bring up a very good point. Depth is something you cannot take for granted at the cornerback position, especially on the boundaries. as much as I really think maybe Cater learned his lesson and can improve, I don't want to force a rectangle peg into a square hole even here.
Yep,
He got exposed when he was forced onto that boundary, and it took away what I think was a very, very promising previous season and made a lot of people sour on him. And everybody's in this microwave, what have you done for me lately generation mindset. And they forgot everything that he was when he was a undrafted free agent rookie and came out shutting people down. And he got put into a spot where he shouldn't have been there. So hopefully that's what ends up happening. I think the same exact thing happened to Needham. So want to keep the guys in their areas of strength. And for Kohu, that's more of the nickel cornerback spot. And I'd really like to see Bonner and Cam Smith get some opportunities to develop for that depth.
Cam Smith on the surface feels a little bit like a smaller cornerback, but he's actually the same height as Eli Apple, and people will instantly start rolling their eyes. But when you look at the top down, how the Dolphins had to sign Apple on the fly just to kind of fill a gap. I mean, if you can get that type of production from a year 2 Cam Smith, I think you're very happy with that. Just having someone else you can trust in the boundary hopefully sets up for a good year 3. Steve, what do you got for number 2?
Number 2, just give me a moment. All right, number 2, head coach Mike McDaniel and Tua. And I'm grouping them together here because, frankly, they're biscuits and gravy. They go together, and, frankly, they're a package deal. And I think that each of them individually have stuff that they need to work on, that they need to show. They're not going to show it in training camps. They're not going to go out in the joint practices and all of a sudden flash it. And, frankly, I hope that they don't show it in preseason games. I think week 1, all of a sudden we see Tyreek doing these little quick cheat motions that turn it into almost like a quasi arena football league motion to get that head start for Tyreek. So, he's not going to show those types of things, but play calling consistency, when it's 3rd and 1, don't going back to pass, use those running backs that frankly overperformed and overachieved versus the expectations of what we really thought that they were going to do. I want to see less reliance on the pass. And I think we did see a much better balance. I think season 1, I don't have the percentage of pass run ratio from 2023. 2022, it was like 60 on the pass, 40 on the rush. And he definitely evened that out, especially when he saw what he had in Mostert and A-Chain on the field last year, or A-Chan, sorry. So I'd like to see less reliance on the passing and then getting play calls in on time. And I think that this is a good segue to getting into the Tua part of this is they are relying upon each other to get the play calls in, relay it in the huddle, and get to the line of scrimmage, for God's sakes, and give yourself more than 6, 7, 8 seconds, because you need an opportunity as a quarterback to read the defense, to figure out what am I going to do with this. And so I think that's a big thing. And we saw it in year 1 with Tua and McDaniel. Year 2 saw it again, and it's just so frustrating sitting there at home screaming at the television saying, get to the line of scrimmage, we're counting down the clock, and then it's like a rush process and you don't get that opportunity. And it's not even so much just reading the defense, it's getting an offense set, getting them an opportunity. Give your center and tackles and guards an opportunity to figure out, who do I have in front of me, and worry about their protections. So it really, I think, sets them back. And then you end up with boneheaded plays or penalties that could have been really good for us, but they weren't, because everybody was rushed getting up to there. So and then the last thing on McDaniel would be, I imagine that he really truly is in a lab or in his kitchen cooking stuff up.
Oh yeah.
He introduced those cheat motions to the league, and everybody's like, oh my God, what is this? And all of a sudden we see copycats kind of pop up. I know he didn't invent it, but frankly, nobody remembers it. They'll remember McDaniel doing it last year. But I imagine that he's going to be working on some new stuff. Maybe it's getting the tight end finally involved in the Miami Dolphins offense for the first time since I can really remember. We've heard about A-Chan getting moved out of the pocket more on the boundaries as a pass receiver. So we just don't know what he's going to be cooking up. So I'm looking forward to that. The Tua part of this is, I don't know if it's in him. I don't know if it's something you can develop and all of a sudden they form it, but I really want to see him develop more of a field general type mentality. You have the Marinos, the Elways, the Rodgers, Manning, Brady. When they stepped onto the field, they were business. When they stepped onto the field and it was, 2 minutes left in the end of a half, end of the game, they had a presence about them, and you really want to start to see that develop in a quarterback. And if Tua is able to develop that, it'll garner a lot more presence about him and what he's doing. And frankly, it's a lot more comforting to see with that confidence. Pre-snap, really want to see Tua improve that. And again, it's getting to the line of scrimmage with more time on the clock, reading and understanding and dissecting. And all too often I get the feeling that he leaves the huddle knowing where he's going to go with the ball. Mm-hmm. And he might, and some people like, hey, he doesn't work his progressions. That's a lie. He does work progressions, but all too often you see, and this might tie into how much time does he have to look at what he has on the field, but get an opportunity to see who's on what person. I'm thinking I'm going to go to Hill, but I see Achane over there on an island with somebody that has no business covering somebody like Achane. I'm going to go that way, and just give yourself an opportunity to go through those reads and understand really, hey, I have more options than just Waddle and Hill, and I'm going to have to dump it down to somebody. So it's going to be, a running back, but I just want to see that. And then ultimately it's taking the step up. I'm not going to talk contract stuff here. He's done every single thing that we've asked him, that he's listening to us, every single thing that he's diagnosed himself. He's been very introspective to what he needs to do. He was aware of his health concerns, his concussions. He went, he bulked up, he did the right things that he needed to do. Everybody mocked the jiu-jitsu. Well, you know what? It kept him out of a lot of trouble last year when he could have been in trouble. This year, I think he wants to be a little bit more mobile. He went and he's working with John Beck as his passing coach. I think that we're going to see some different layers that maybe we haven't seen before. So really looking forward to that. And frankly, as a unit between the two of them, it's year 3. I'm not going to say the Dolphins team window is closing, but it's year 3 for me, in my opinion. I'm kind of a leader of team no expectations, but I think it's kind of do or die for them. But they really need to put together a consistency where they're not getting our hopes up 6, 7, 8 games into the season, and all of a sudden they go through the typical flop towards the end, and we have a Titans game, and what we had was a division that slipped through our fingertips. So training camp, preseason, it's about them all getting together, organized collectively. It's exciting to know that we have 3 joint sets of practices with different teams, an opportunity for them to go up against some different people, let them fight the other teams' players and not infight with each other. So those are my 2 top things that I really am looking out for here at training camp.
And those practices, the more teams do that, the more they do those, 2-3 times before a game, we're going to see those preseason games just matter less and less. And people are still going to try to squeeze value out of those. But I think that's a great point. It's hard not to talk about Tua with someone trying to imply it as being some sort of drama. But the one thing I'm curious about, and I have nothing to back this up, is who gets the last say when a ball is hiked? Is it McDaniel, since it takes, you being down to 10 seconds left on the play clock before you get the play in, and then all of a sudden Tua can't really do anything except do the play that's called? Or if there's a scenario where Tua can maybe get a play call in with there being 20 seconds on the clock, maybe not as detailed, maybe there aren't as many pre-snap answers, but let him solve that out on his own. I think that's an excellent point, and you need that. Like everything when it's working perfect is great. McDaniel's awesome, but like we see the disasters of Baltimore and Buffalo where it's, why can't we get a play call in? Why can't we just simply get to the line and get 4 yards? Because it's not only just derailing one play, it's derailing the drive, and it's derailing a game and derailing an entire season.
Absolutely. I mean, I really think, granted, we came out a little bit too weak, a couple really bad play calls. But that game in Frankfurt, we could have won. We shut them down in that second half. But the first half of them, it's the primetime games. It's the games not at 1 o'clock at home that you just kind of get that feeling of what Dolphins team, what Tua are we going to see out there on the field? And unfortunately for the first half of that game, we saw what they really couldn't afford to be against the Super Bowl champions, and in an environment where it was foreign to everybody, but they were very quick in that stadium to rally around the Chiefs and help them out there.
Steve, this has been great. I love points 1 and 2. Let's hear, what do you got to close us out here?
Pass catchers. This team, and I'm using the word pass catchers and not wide receivers because Mike McDaniel does not limit himself to wide receivers is the people that are going to catch the balls. Some tight ends are going to catch the balls. I mean, let's be real. There's no longer Darren Waller out there, but you've got Travis Kelce, you've got Kittle, you've got some pretty dynamic people out there. Jonnu Smith is bringing a different layer to this offense. I think a lot more with the yards after catching, his speed and his ability to break contact, which a couple tight ends ago, we never saw anybody breaking contact. So in any case, I digress. I really think that beyond just the two big of Waddle and Hill, this team is absolutely stacked. And I was initially kind of a little bit iffy on OBJ coming in, did a little bit of looking in, listening to outside people and hearing what he is. And I'd said this on Finn's TV, that it's an extremely high value pick, that we have somebody like him as a third option at wide receiver. And frankly, coming up to 30 years old, Hill, God, the guy is an absolute machine, but let's be real. He started to break down towards the end of the season, at the end of games. You could just see that he couldn't do it. And then who did we have to fill in those spots? And then if Waddle kind of got dinged up, then we were really digging deeper into our depth, and we have to avoid that. But if you have an option like OBJ, who when he got called on up in Baltimore, he showed up. He had his best of his career yards per reception last year. As a number 3 wide receiver with as many years under his belt that he had, he showed up, and he showed up big. And I think that that's really big, but there's an also off-field component that you read and you dig a little bit deeper past the media stuff that they like to say about Dolphins players. And that's that he's becoming more of a, hey, I'm a veteran, I'm a mentor to the youth that we have around here. So I think that that's really big for a rather young wide receiving core that we have there. So you have number 1, number 2, number 3, OBJ. Then you've got, does Ezekama, is he going to be able to stick around for a full season? He showed some flashes early on. I got excited, and then he had the unfortunate neck injury that just kept him out. I'm excited to see him back. If anything, for his sake, I'm happy that he's able to be back doing something that he clearly loves more than he loves is afraid of, the fear of losing stuff. But Berrios, Craycraft, Sanders, I think that we're going to see some of the names cut this year. They were brought back on contracts, but they weren't contracts that are going to say, God, we can't afford to give up that much money for nothing.
Absolutely.
But because I think that's also a product or result of the Taj and Malik Washington and them getting drafted and what they could potentially bring. And I think everybody has that hope. Not everybody. A lot of us, the crazy, stupid fans are like, oh my God, we're going to get such value out of these guys. We got to be reasonable. They're younger, but there's a lot of talent there. So I'm looking forward to seeing what they can bring to it. Running backs, proved last year, Mostert can catch, he can score. Achane, absolutely dynamic. And if he really truly is being worked more into the mix outside the backfield, seriously, you can only cover so many people. So if you have Waddle, Hill, Jonnu Smith, and Achane out wide, how are you going to be able to cover all of those and worry about, a running back in the backfield, whether it's Mostert or Wright or Brooks, just a lot of options. So my one thing about getting overly excited about a tight end in this offense is, again, just looking back at the past decade plus, we just haven't had that. We use a tight end ad nauseum.
Yep.
And I think that that's a product of, again, Tua has his safety blankets. He knows that he has Waddle. He knows that he has Hill. And so, but also it's a product of an offensive line that, frankly, the offensive scheme last year in Tua hit a lot of those warts of our offensive line that didn't give him the opportunity to do a deep drop and really scan the field. Mm-hmm. So again, I hope that the offensive line can gel well enough to provide the offense, McDaniel, to an opportunity to build out that playbook to say, hey, we're going to stretch everybody out with those wide receivers, and John is going to be wide open, and give him an opportunity.
Just one more second. That's all we need. One more second offensive line.
It really is. It really is. And then that's also on to, again, to scan through and know where his people are going to be. And I think a key component of this is Waddle, Hill, OBJ, Jonnu Smith. They're all experienced players who can get that timing down. And this offense 110% relies upon a wide receiver, pass catcher, being where they're supposed to be when they're supposed to be there, because Tua is going to put it on that spot. So the pass catchers, that whole training camp battle over who's going to be left out, I think the practice squad has some expanded rules this year that I'm not 100% up on. So we'll be able to tuck some people, but we're not going to be able to protect them all.
Exactly.
So you always have that risk of somebody being poached from the squad. You can guarantee at least one wide receiver is going to get poached by the Patriots. It's like the sun coming up every day. It's reliable. So just hopefully we can keep as much talent as we possibly can active, practice squad a couple of them, and just continue to develop that talent, because we got to be real. Whether or not he gets a contract extension, he himself had said, after this contract, I'm done. So you don't know if Hill's going to be sticking around too much longer. So we have to start building up that talent that we have sitting back. And hopefully we're going to be able to do that this year and see what they can do on the field.
The Washingtons are some of the hardest questions, because the Dolphins are in a spot where, okay, can we keep 2 late round draft picks? But at the same time, there's zero doubt in my mind that if one of those guys are, headed towards a practice squad, you're telling me that no other team in the NFL is going to sniff around a wide receiver Mike McDaniel liked? Like that's such a silly thing. So that's one question in itself. And I love bringing up Jonnu Smith. Because the Dolphins, how they use tight ends is so unique. Nobody targets the tight ends less than the Miami Dolphins, yet in back-to-back years, the Dolphins' number 3 player in targets has been a tight end in Mike Gesicki and then Durham Smythe. So I'm really interested to see if maybe that, I think the usage rate of tight ends in Miami was like 4.5% of the time tight ends were targeting. I wouldn't be surprised if that number doesn't really increase, but Jonnu Smith, just the way he's a yak guy, becomes the best 20 to 20, offensive weapon in the entire NFL. Just that guy who's going to gash you for chunk yardage. Red zone targets, they just love to give it to Tyreek so much in that area with his speed. It's hard to ignore that. But Steve, who's going to be third in targets by the end of the season?
Devon Achane.
I love it. I love that answer.
I think because I've been talking about him not being in the backfield, but where a player is lined up in this offense means absolutely nothing to what they're actually going to do. And that keeps the defense on their heels. And I really, really, he got robbed. He got so robbed. I don't think there was a chance that any rookie was going to knock off CJ Stroud with the season that he had. But had Devon Achane been able to stay healthy and on the field, he would have given him a run for his money in a lot of the voters' eyes. He would have been a strong runner-up. He wouldn't have knocked him off. So he's my guy. Devon Achane, really love what he can bring to the offense again, regardless of where he's lined up.
At one Steve Hallett on X, on Twitter, whatever you call it. Steve, this has been an absolute blast. Thank you so much for joining all of us here on Another Dolphins Podcast. If you'd like to hear more from Steve, be sure to check out Finn's TV on YouTube. Steve, you got any final closing thoughts here before we wrap up?
No, I just hope everybody is patient, not only with Tua's contract, but with what we're going to be doing. Remember last preseason, really didn't show anything, didn't see much during training camp time. Week 1, we went out there and had an absolutely stellar game in Los Angeles on the road. Be patient with this team. Try to not knee-jerk reaction. And the last thing I want to say is there's just so much vitriol and people infighting in a fan base that frankly has so much positivity to bring to it. Try to just be a little bit more kind and bring the positivity of what this team brings to us, bring it to the other people that we interact with on a daily basis. Jake, it has been absolutely incredible. Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
Steve, you said it all. That is it. That is all the time we have today on Another Dolphins Podcast. I got to say it one more time, at one Steve Hallett. Be sure to give him a follow. We will talk to you next time, but until then, fins up.
Fins up, buddy.